Today we are going to be canning some sweet corn. The recipe can be found on pages 40 to 41 of the Presto Pressure Canning booklet. I got some beautiful farm fresh sweet corn from a local U-Pick farm. I shucked it at the farm and I brought home a couple grocery bags. The first step is to clean the corn under cold running water, making sure to remove the ear silks. This is about 1 grocery bag full of ears of corn. It's beautiful and shiny, super fresh. This U-Pick farm has a reputation for their corn. And the first step is you'll boil a large pot of water. And then you'll drop those ears in there carefully and you'll boil them for 3 minutes. This is the first blanching step of the canning process. After 3 minutes, you'll remove the ears of corn and submerge them in an ice water bath. This just helps stop the cooking process quickly. The purpose of blanching is to deactivate the enzymes in the corn. That helps with the preservation process. And then you'll just repeat for all the ears of corn. I like using pint jars to can my corn. I'm a big fan of the Ball brand mason jars. They work really well for these projects. Once the blanched corn is cool enough to handle, you can then cut the kernels off of the cob. I like to stand the ear up on the end and then slice down vertically, which I did need to do off camera. And you want to cut about 3/4 of the way through the kernels of corn. You can see these nice flat sheets of kernels that come off the cob. You don't want to cut too close to that center cob of the corn or scrape it. 3/4 of the way is perfect. And then you'll pour the corn into a large pot. This is 8 cups of corn. And then for each batch, the recipe states to add 2 cups of hot water, but I found I actually needed more water, so for future batches I added a little bit extra water, and then I had some extra on the side just in case I needed it. And then you'll heat that corn up to a boil. And since I had a lot of corn and I wanted to run a full canner cycle, I just went ahead and put in a total of 16 cups of corn. Once it has reached a boiling point, you'll want to get it stirred up to kind of break up those sheets of corn kernels. And you'll boil for a total of 5 minutes. And the pressure canner needs to run with 3 quarts of hot water, but I've found that if I have all of my empty jars lined up in there and I put in 3 quarts of water, the jars start just falling over. So I start with 2 quarts of water, and then when all the jars are full, then I add the 3rd quart. And you can put in a couple tablespoons of white vinegar just to help prevent any kind of mineral buildup. You'll then take out 1 jar and put on the wide mouth funnel. And then we'll add the corn to 1-inch headspace. And I find that the more I go through this process, I can eyeball it closer and closer. And there you can see that 1-inch mark at the top of the measuring tool. Now this was the first batch of corn that I had canned this season. So it took a minute to kind of get back into the swing of things. I made a little bit of a mess, but that's okay. Practice makes perfect. by the third or the fourth can, you can do it pretty quickly. So then you just want to make sure you get the corn up to 1 inch headspace, just the corn by itself. We'll start by loosely packing that corn in there. You don't want to squish it down. So just nice and loose. And then you'll put in half a teaspoon of sea salt. So for 1 pint of corn, you'll put in half a teaspoon of salt. And at this point, you'll then add in hot water up to 1 inch of headspace. So this is where the recipe says to use 2 cups of water, but I ended up using more. This is why, because the water isn't just to boil the corn with, it's also to fill in those air gaps while you're canning. And I ended up using everything that was in the pot, and I needed more. But you can just boil some water in a container, on the stove top or in the microwave, just to have on hand so that you can get those measurements correct. You'll then debubble, which is basically just brushing the ingredients around in the jar to let any air bubbles loosen, and then make sure that the liquid is up to 1 inch headspace. And then I just wiped off the rim with a damp paper towel. And here we'll add a new unused lid. And then put the ring on and twist until it's finger tight. And then use the tongs to carefully place the jar in the canner. And they sometimes do stick a little bit, but again, it's part of the process. It's all good. And then you'll just repeat until the canner is full. I was able to get 9 jars in this first batch with just a couple little pieces of corn left over, so I'm glad I doubled the batch. And you'll seal the lid on and then turn the heat on high. And then it will start to steam. So you want to let the steam vent for about 10 minutes. And here are the canning weights. Just that center part by itself is 5 psi, and then you can add more rings to make 10 and 15 psi. This particular recipe specifies 10 psi, so we'll have the base plus 1 ring, and you'll place that weight on the vent pipe. PSI stands for pounds per square inch, and it just measures the pressure inside the canner. You can see the air vent has popped up, and the little weight is doing the hula dance, that's what they call it. And you can adjust the temperature until that little weight is rocking evenly, and then after 55 minutes you can turn the heat off and then very carefully move the pot to a cooler area. And then once that airlock falls down, it's safe to take the canning weight off. You don't want to take it off before then, because you'll get a big bunch of steam and you'll burn your hand. And then after about 10 minutes, it's then safe to open the lid, and then you can use the tongs to carefully remove those cans. And if you look closely, you can actually see that there's bubbles coming up, especially if you look at the surface. The contents of the cans are actually still boiling inside because they're under pressure. So they will continue to boil even when they're out of the canner for another few minutes. You'll then let them sit for 12 to 24 hours. So this is the next day. We're going to test the seal. So just remove the ring, and you can see it's possible to lift the jar just by holding the lid. And when you press on the top, there is no movement, there's no indentation. So all of these jars have sealed, which is awesome. And then you'll wash and dry the jars and label them with the contents and the date. They are now shelf stable for 12 to 18 months. Thank you for watching. And here is a little piece of bonus content. My son asked me to refilm this section so he could give a thumbs up too.